So we're working our way pretty much word by word through the Gospel according to St. Mark, and we've gotten as far as chapter 7, which begins by telling us that the Pharisees and some of the teachers of the law had come down from Jerusalem, and they gathered around Jesus. So far, so good. Wanted to hear some of the things he was saying, see what he was all about. And while they were there, Mark tells us that they saw some of his disciples eating food with hands that were quote-unquote unclean, that is, unwashed. Now, when we read the Bible and we come to the word Pharisee, we're immediately disadvantaged because we attach to that word 2,000 years of negative Christian propaganda. And in Protestant churches like our own, that propaganda is deeply ingrained. The word Pharisee, when we use it, is almost entirely pejorative. And we use the word to demonize other Christian groups who we perceive to be slightly less Christian than we are. So, for example, I was raised in a Baptist type of church, and we often use the word Pharisee to refer to other Christian groups who did their Christianity slightly more formally than we did. And we attached to their formality insincerity. And so when we spoke of them as Pharisees, what we were saying was, we're more sincere in our belief than they are. We're better than they are. We're more Christian than they are. And when you use lazy words like that to demonize other people and other groups, it gives you a great excuse to be lazy and not think about what Jesus actually said and why he said it. And if you're trying to be Christian in our culture, it's good to be lazy because it gives you an excuse not to actually think about what Jesus said. And you might want to not think about what Jesus said because it makes Christianity far more comfortable and palatable. So, to understand what's happening in this episode, you have to first of all understand that the Pharisees were good people. Let's get that straight. Good people who did their very best to live good lives. To understand how good these people were, you have to first of all understand that in the centuries immediately preceding the birth of Christ, Israel was in a state of cultural flux. Theirs had, for 400 or 500 years, been a very traditional culture, a very conservative, insular culture. And in the centuries before Christ, this conservative culture struggled to survive. So what happened was, in the 4th century BC, Alexander the Great from Greece conquered much of the known world. And his reason for this conquest wasn't political, it was ideological. Alexander wasn't in the empire business. He was happy to leave that to Walter White. What Alexander wanted was to spread the enlightened culture of ancient Greece to the dark and pagan corners of the world. His dream, in a nutshell, was to turn the world Greek. And following his premature death in Babylon in 323 BC, his successors succeeded in making that dream a reality. So what you find historically is that in the 3rd and the 2nd and the 1st centuries before Christ, the world is becoming Greek. And the people who adopted this Greekness most enthusiastically were the Romans, who had no real culture of their own. So they basically assumed Greek culture and spread it evangelistically all across the world. So before Christ, the culture of Greece is replacing all other cultures. And in most parts of the world, this was a welcome thing. It brought education, it brought enlightenment. Everyone thought it was fantastic, except in ancient Israel. In ancient Israel, as the enlightened culture of Greece clashed with the conservative, they would say backward culture of Israel, it created enormous tensions within society. For example, Conservative Jews were very prudish, did not appreciate any flesh being shown on anyone. Ancient Greeks went to the gymnasium in the nude. Actually, this trend started in New York. They have naked gyms in New York now. Can't imagine. It's an experiment in body positivity, apparently. But the ancient Greeks did it because they thought the human body was the ultimate expression of beauty, so it was immoral to cover it up. And what you find in 2nd BC and 1st century BC Israel is Greek gymnasiums are opening up. And Jews are actually working out naked. It was an anathema. Conservative Jews did not at all appreciate eroticism. And yet all over Israel, Greek theatres, which often build highly erotic Greek dramas, were becoming very popular among young Jews. Conservative Jews very much appreciated the learning of the books of Moses, the Torah. And yet all over Israel, this traditional learning was being abandoned in favour of more enlightened ideas from Plato and Homer and Euripides. And so during the period immediately before Christ, young Jews were abandoning Jewishness in favour of what they thought was a more sophisticated culture. It was literally a clash of ideas that could not be more opposite or different. And the Pharisee movement was born as a reaction to all of this. Its raison d'etre was to preserve traditional, conservative Jewish ideals in the face of this ubiquitous, aggressive Greek-Roman culture. And in that regard, they were aptly named. The word Pharisee literally means the ones who are separated. They were all about separating themselves from, quote-unquote, the world. Separating themselves from everything they considered to be wrong and immoral in their Greek-Roman society. So to be one of these people in this era was to walk around the world and to say, no, that's wrong. That gymnasium, not doing it. That theatre, not going there. Those ideas, I don't want to know anything about them. I want to separate myself from what I see in the world. And in that act of separation, I will be true to my faith. And God will like me. And God will approve of me. My religion is all about separation between me and that. And so all over Israel, before Christ, they set up schools and Bible studies in which the traditional teachings of the Torah was reinforced. They sought to teach young Jewish men and women what the Bible really said, what the Bible really meant, and how it should be applied in this difficult, dirty world that they now found themselves living in. Nothing wrong with any of this. They were good people, motivated by only the purest of ideas. To give you an idea of how detailed they were in their teachings, let me read to you the introduction to a group of Orthodox Jews' guidelines for the Sabbath. Now, please understand, I'm not being anti-Semitic in reading you what I'm about to read you. What I'm about to read you comes from the intellectual ears of the Pharisees, and I'm reading this to you because I want you to understand how seriously these people take their religion. So, rules on the Sabbath. This is the introduction, right? The Jews call the Sabbath the Shabbat. The Shabbat laws are quite complex, requiring careful study and a qualified teacher. At first, it's often overwhelming and seems like an impossible number of restrictions. But spending Shabbat with others who are also Shabbat observant will show you that you eventually too can become comfortable with these laws. As long as you realize that becoming Shomer Shabbat, that Sabbath observant, is a gradual process rather than an overnight transformation. You will also recognize that the wealth of details you're about to learn provides for a lifetime of scholarship. Even those who have been doing this for years find there is always more to learn on the subject. In other words, man, this stuff is deep. You can study this for 40 years and you'll never get to understand all of it. Then we get to the details. Here is a brief summary of the laws you're likely to encounter. Let's start with some basic activities from which we are to refrain on the Sabbath. Writing, erasing, and tearing. I don't do much erasing anyway, so I'm good. Business transactions, driving in cars, using the telephone, shopping, turning on or off anything which uses electricity, including lights, radios, television, computer, air conditioners, and alarm clocks, cooking, baking, gardening, mowing your lawn, doing laundry. Now, middle-aged and busy as I am, I actually read this and think, I'm good with that. I wouldn't mind having a day a week where I was not allowed to do anything. I wouldn't mind having a day where someone could say to me, hey, take out the garbage and mow the lawn. Against my religion. Aren't you going to cook anything? Against my faith. One day a week, that'd be all right. That'd probably be good for us, no? All right. Guess we're all attached to turning on lights. They go on, speaking of lights. For example, so glad there's an example. Lights which will be needed on the Sabbath must be turned on before the Sabbath. Automatic timers may be used, because we're not strict. As long as they're turned on before the Sabbath. Then listen to what they say. The refrigerator may be used, but again, to ensure that its use does not engender any of the forbidden rules, the fridge light should be disconnected by unscrewing the light bulb before the Sabbath day. Wow! Now, this is a modern version of what Jesus was dealing with. And obviously as technology develops, the rules develop as well. Now, whatever else we may think of these people, whatever else we may think of their faith and religion, the one thing we may not accuse them of is insincerity. To describe these people as being dedicated to the things they believe is in fact to under-describe them. They are fanatical, maybe in a good way, about their religion. They actually believe it and are careful about how they practice it. I mean, if your beliefs take you to a place where it's important to you to unscrew the light bulb in your fridge so you don't offend God, you are nothing if not sincere. So for us in the 21st century, to associate the word Pharisee with insincerity is to miss the point entirely. These people are more serious about their faith than you or I have ever been, even at our best moments. So when Mark tells us that these people are with Jesus and it's dinner time, there's a red flag. Because no area of first century Jewish life was more regulated by these rules than dinner time. Mark also tells us that the disciples didn't wash their hands. Then in verse 3, for the benefit of us non-Jews, Mark tells us that the Pharisees do not eat unless they give their hands a ceremonial washing, thus holding on, notice what he says, to the tradition of the elders. So, notice please that what these people are pushing on Jesus at this point isn't Bible talk. What they're pushing isn't something that's written in the Torah. It's something that comes from what they call the tradition of the elders. And the phrase, the tradition of the elders, was a way of talking about the various layers of teachings and interpretations that had been added to the Bible over the years. Let me visualize this for you. What do we have here? Okay, so pile of books. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that the red book at the bottom is the Bible. Right? So what you're looking at there, that's the Torah, that's the original thing, this was the bit written by Moses, whatever. This is the Bible. And as persons of faith, we would all say the Bible is good, the Bible is useful, we like the Bible, we teach the Bible, we're for the Bible. But the problem with the Bible is that it doesn't have an exhaustive list of what I do and don't do, of how I should and should not live within Greek culture. You know, so I've read the Bible and it doesn't say anything about working out naked at the Greek gym. So I need to add something to the Bible, and I'll put that on top. You know, the Bible doesn't say anything about what's happening at the Greek theatre and all those plays they're showing. So I need to add something to the Bible to clarify. And the Bible doesn't say anything about dinosaurs or Charles Darwin, so I need to add something to the Bible. And the Bible doesn't say anything about the end of the world, so I need to add something to the Bible. And it doesn't say anything about alcohol, and it doesn't say anything about marijuana. So I need to add and add and add and add and add. It doesn't say anything about politics. I need to add all these things to the Bible. And you fast forward 200 or 300 years, and what you end up with is just this pile of books, this pile of information, and it becomes really difficult to distinguish what's Bible and what's been added. Because the original just gets buried underneath all the useful stuff. And it is this useful stuff that was in Jesus' day called the tradition of the elders. In verse 4 we get an idea of how deep this reached into everyday life. So Mark tells us that when they come home from the market, they don't eat unless they wash. That was a rule. Not in the Bible, they just made it up. And they do other things too, such as washing of cups, pitchers, and kettles. So they come to Jesus. And they're really upset because Jesus isn't supporting their traditions. He isn't supporting the things they've added to the Bible. And so they say to him with accusation in their voice, "Why don't your disciples live according to the tradition of the elders, instead of eating their food with unclean hands?" Jesus notice Jesus now. Do you know how you put up with too much crap for too long from people? Come on. And you just take it, and you take it, and you take it, because you think taking it's the right thing to do, because you think taking it will make it better. Fair enough. But maybe in taking it, you're facilitating it. Maybe in taking it, you're saying it's okay. So I'm all over what Jesus does now. He doesn't take it. He doesn't say, "Oh, I'm sorry to have offended you," because you have a right not to be offended, apparently. No. He just fires straight back with correction. He says, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites. Now, the word hypocrite, listen carefully, does not mean insincere. The word hypocrite is a Greek word. It means one thing, only one thing. It means to act. So if you lived in the first century and you used the word hypocrite, you were using that word to refer to the actors and actresses who played roles in the various Greek dramas of which you so disapproved. So you see what Jesus is doing here. He's using a word from the very Greek theatres that these people were so against, and he's saying that thing you hate is actually what you are. You are an actor. Your world is a world of make-believe. Now, understand, when Jesus calls these people actors, he is not accusing them of insincerity or fraudulency. On the contrary, we've already established these people were very sincere about what they believed. The point Jesus is making is that they are insincere about something that is no more attached to reality than the soap opera at the local theatre. It's just complete invention. He says, "These people honour me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain, because their teachings are just rules taught by men." All this stuff that you're so sold out to, it doesn't matter. None of it matters. You're spending your life on something that does not matter. It's not sincerity Jesus has a problem with, it's reality. They're 100% committed to trivialities. So notice he talks about the heart. And he does this because in the ancient world, people believed that the heart was where a person lived. If he were saying this sentence in the 21st century, he'd talk about the head. This was where a person's angers and hatreds, lusts and loyalties, decisions, where all of that happened and felt. Life happened in the heart in the ancient world. And Jesus is saying, look, God simply could not care less about all of the things you think are so important. I mean, if you want to unscrew the light bulb in your fridge because you think that makes a difference, knock yourself out. It's not going to do you any harm. But please don't think God cares. Please don't think any of this actually matters. It's not important. It's just rules you made up. But I'll tell you what is important. I'll tell you what actually does matter. What you're like. Who you are. The way you're loyal or disloyal. How you handle your hurts and your angers and your lusts. What decisions you do and don't make. The choices that make you the man or woman you are on a day-to-day basis. That stuff actually matters. God actually does care about that. And it's that bit of you that God wants. Not the make-believe bit. As a negative example, look at this. So he talks to them and he says, look guys, you've got a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe tradition. For Moses said, honor your father and mother. It's good. Anyone who curses their father and mother should be put to death. A bit extreme, but as a parent, I'm for it. But you say, anyone who declares that what they would have given to their father and mother is korban, I'll explain that in a moment. And so you no longer let them help their father and mother. So what's happening in this sentence is, obviously in the ancient world, there's no pensions, there's no social care. And the way life worked was that you took care of your kids. And the social contract was that when your kids grew up and you were too old to take care of yourself, your kids would take care of you. That was the way it was meant to work. And so what was happening was some of these deeply religious people were getting to a point in life where they were focused on their career and their business, and they were looking at their elderly parents and saying, you know what? I've got to put my kids to private school. I can't afford to help you out. I'm too busy to visit. Too busy to look after you. And that's bad enough. That is bad enough. But what these people were doing was they were finding a religious justification for doing this bad thing. And that's nasty. It's been well said there will always be good and bad people. There always will. But it often takes religion to turn a good person into a bad person. And what then is the point of it? What is the point of it? If your beliefs make you nasty, why believe? Now I can tell the way this text flows that Jesus is fizzing at this point. Fizzing. So in the next sentence, he turns to the crowd around him and he says, listen, understand. The reason I know Jesus is angry is because in the Gospels, he only ever uses the word listen when he's making a really forceful point. It's like he's saying, get this into your heads, yeah? Get this into your heads. Nothing outside a man can make him unclean by going into him. It's the stuff that comes out of a man that makes him unclean. And in the religious thought world of first century Israel, this was a dangerous idea. Not washing before you eat. Not being careful about what you eat. not obeying the rules that made you immoral in the eyes of God. This is an iconoclastic statement Jesus is making here. It doesn't matter. None of it matters. Now, that is not to say that there is no such thing as right and wrong. That is not to say that there is no such thing as objectively immoral and objectively immoral. But according to Jesus, the things that make us so are not the things that come into our life, but rather, notice what he says, that come out of us, from the inside, from who we are. Jesus raises the bar on religion. He said it's about your words, it's about your thoughts, it's about your behavior. In verse 17, the disciples don't get it. He turns to them and says, "Are you so dull?" "Oh, we're trying." Look at what he says. He gets graphic now. He says, here's the deal for it, that is food that you think is either clean or unclean. It doesn't go into your heart, it goes into your stomach and then it goes out of the body. What this sentence literally says in Greek is food gets flushed down the toilet. Simple logic. You eat it, it goes to your stomach, it goes away to the sea or wherever we put it, and it doesn't go near your heart. It doesn't go near your soul. It doesn't affect your mind. And since your heart and soul and mind are the determining factors in the kind of persons we are, food therefore has no effect one way or the other. The real issue is what he talks about in verses 21 to 23. Look at what he says. Here's the real issue, yeah? It's what comes out of a person, that's the problem. For out of our hearts, that's where the evil thoughts come from. The sexual immorality, the theft, the murder, the adultery. Notice that Jesus isn't doing away with the demand for purity and morality. He's sharpening it. The greed, the malice, the deceit, the lewdness, the envy, the slander, the arrogance, the folly. I guess he covered all of us there one way or another, yeah? And it's all these things, he says, that come from out of us. And it's these things that make us unclean. And notice that he says that your hypocrisy leads to evils. Not your insincerity, but your focusing on things that don't matter. It's that leads to evils. It sounds really cynical. But the holier you seem, the more suspicious the Bible is of you. In our generation, we know enough to know that religion is often a great hiding place for evil. We know that some of the nastiest environments in our society are often of a believing nature. Many of us have the experience of knowing that some of the nastiest people we meet were believing people. Jesus drives at that here. The whiter the wash, the greater the darkness. I'm the last person to say our church is perfect. That would be an oxymoron here of all places. But one of the reasons why we are often careful to say that we have an unchurchy church is because we are aware that church can often be a great way of covering up real issues. I mean, you can go to church and you can say your prayers and read your Bible and mind your P's and Q's and all that, and you can con yourself into thinking that because you read your Bible and say your prayers and go to church and all that, that you don't have to deal with the fact that there are corners of your life that are actually wrong and actually need to be changed and actually need to be improved. And the religious sprinkling just gives you an excuse to cover up. And that's the exact offence of this religious text written to religious people. spend less time on the things that really don't matter. And spare at least a moment's thought to what does. And you know, the reality is that screwing a light bulb from your fridge so the light doesn't work on the Sabbath, that's easy. Being less of an idiot takes work. Being more moral, more decent, more genuine, more caring, more loving, more giving, more sacrificing, less selfish, less angry, more forgiving. That takes work. And that's the work that Jesus would have us do. Spend less time on the outside and focus on the inside. One of the values of our church, I think, is that we want to encourage ourselves to be all that we can be, to be better than we were last week. In so many ways, we each settle for less than we once hoped for, and less than we could be. This week's a new week. Why not do some hard work and figure out what stuff we can get rid of that will make us better, that will make our lives happier. That was all I intended to say, but it's past. Let me leave you with this, changing the subject slightly. It occurred to me while Carissa was talking that, sometimes church, sometimes it's a gathering of pain. Do you know what I mean? Like we come here and we come with so much baggage, so much difficulty. We're all worried about something. We're all depressed about something. There's so much going on in our lives. And if you were to add up the cumulative pain in our lives, it would be unbelievable. And you know what? I understand anxieties, and depressions, and fears, and regrets, pain. I understand all of that. In many ways, that's normal because life is hard. Really hard. When you think about it cynically, the best any of us are ever doing is staring into the abyss. Pretty much for all of us, our best years are behind us. So I understand the anxiety and the depression and the downness. But you know what I don't understand though? Do you know what's genuinely a mystery to me? And I see it every week here. It's that we're not anxious and depressed and down in the dumps all the time. Yeah? It's that we dare to have hope. We dare to believe that our best days are not behind us. We dare to believe that we can be better. That we can get on with it. That we can put one foot in front of the other and somehow it'll all be okay. That we have that hope and faith and belief is actually extraordinary, given what we've been through and what we go through. It really is. And I see so much of that in you. And it's a never-ending inspiration to me. So keep believing, keep hoping, keep putting one foot in front of the other, and getting on with it. Because you're good at that. You really are. God bless you. Thank you for coming. See you next Sunday.